Good evening, guys. This is Winter, and I'm coming to you tonight with a new idea Aegis and I have had. We're looking for a way to fill up our week with new and original content while also giving you guys the chance to get to know us. In order to do so, we decided we would each take a week and basically go back and forth and do three 15-minute videos that were intended to be connected to one another, discussing things we like. So, for example, the topic I picked for this new video format for the coming week is to discuss the plot line behind the Black Parade album, which is something I mentioned in our first podcast. I thought it would be a great way to introduce myself, it would be a great way to introduce my interests, and also show you how I love to break down music. It's one of my biggest passions. So, on that note, I want to discuss the Black Parade. As most of you know, the Black Parade is an album written by My Chemical Romance. It is their third studio album, and most people would consider it their magnum opus. For those of you who have not listened to the album, I would highly recommend you pause here and you give it a chance. The whole album is a perfect show of what a plot-driven rock album looks like. Or they call them rock operas is probably the right word. Another example would be Green Day's American Idiot or The Wall by Pink Floyd. So, this album, for those of you who don't know, focuses around the death of a man simply known as the Patient. And in my opinion, there are actually two storylines on the album. The first storyline, which I'm going to discuss in this video, and part of the next video, is about the man dying of cancer and his descent into hell, and then his recovery and his decision to carry on and therefore get to heaven. It is the known plot of the album, and it's the one that most people are aware of. I still want to give my breakdown and my own opinion because I do find it varies somewhat from other people. But I also want to talk about what I consider to be the lost story of the album. And that centers around a single post on, I believe, Twitter from Gerard, the lead singer of the band, and what I consider two missing songs from the album. And I'll clarify that when we get to that point. But first, let's go over the main plot of the original album. First of all, I want to set the timeline. Simply put, the album appears to exist at around the end of World War II. I say that because the aesthetic of the music video for Welcome to the Black Parade, as well as the cover art and the inner art of the album, all appears to be set in an older society with blimps being shown, war craters, and things like that. It just appears to be set directly after World War II. In the first song, called The End, you basically are introduced to the patient. He welcomes you to come watch him die, and he welcomes you to come feel his pain and understand the cost of having to move on. And that's an important theme in this album. While I find the first song to be relatively basic, it launches you into the album when combined with the second song, which is called Dead. Now, most people can guess the end combined with Dead is when the patient dies. I actually believe this is the first sign that the album was originally a different story than what it is now. I believe Dead is not in the right place in the album, because an important part of this song is that it appears to be partially told from the patient's point of view as he speaks to his girlfriend about his own death. Well, he shows his anger at the doctor by openly mocking the doctor and saying things like, "in my honest observation," mocking phrases, and also questioning why he's dead, and basically saying to the woman, "if you get to heaven, I'll be there." And that's important because it sounds angry, and it doesn't fit in this part of the album from the plot that I understand. Because the next song, which is called This Is How I Disappear, I personally believe is from the perspective predominantly of his girlfriend or wife. In this song, I believe the man has just died, and he's standing over his own hospital bed, listening as his girlfriend or wife admits she was cheating on him. And I don't believe the seance referenced in the song is necessarily a literal seance. I think this is showing his girlfriend, wife, I'm just going to say his wife from now on. It represents her grieving process and her telling him that there are things that she has done that he should never know. And near the end of the song, it flips back to his point of view. Because he basically says, I'm just a ghost, so you don't think I can hurt you anymore. But do you really want to see how far down I can sink? This references a few things. First of all, I think it implies he was abusive, at least towards the end of his life, towards her. It also implies that he is enraged by what she has told him. Now, whether it is cheating or whether it is that she didn't care about him, a theme that's touched on later, he becomes enraged. And I do think that if this album fit together the way I see it in my head, This Is How I Disappear would come before Dead. But sound-wise, it makes more sense for Dead to be led into by the end. The next song is called The Sharpest Live, and this is probably one of the more obvious points that you have to either accept that this is a flashback or it's the flash at the end of his life. I've heard people talk about it in different ways. I choose to accept it is a flashback scenario. And basically, it's talking about him being depressed. And I think it is a combination of him finding out that he has cancer and him having PTSD from the war that you eventually find out he was in. And it does touch on themes of potentially she left him, she cheated on him. You hear phrases like, give me a kiss before you go, and give me a shot to remember. And all these things tie in with drinking. They can be double entendred with literally the thoughts of suicide. They can be tied in with potentially her leaving his bedside or her leaving his house as she leaves him, or potentially goes to stay with her family. But I think it shows the breakdown of his relationship with his significant other before he winds up in the hospital dying, but after he finds out he has cancer. So, assuming this is the moment where you get to witness the flash in his eyes of everything that he regrets before he dies, the next song makes sense. Welcome to the Black Parade is the penultimate centerpiece of this album that most people who don't even know My Chemical Romance are aware of. This song, to me, has three phases. The first is the ending of his flashback from The Sharpest Lives and him thinking about what his father said to him before his father died years ago. Basically, son, will you be the savior of people who need help? Will you be the person that people who need you to be there, you'll be the person who will be there for them? And then you get this weird screamed repetition of what was basically said by his father. And most people say that part of the song doesn't fit. I firmly believe it does fit. To me, that is him as he's dying or right after he's died, showing a bastardized version of what his father said. The distorted message, the ruined message, the feeling that he failed, the feeling that he twisted it. And I think the twisted part of it is important for the actual album. I feel like it's supposed to show that throughout his life, he twisted that message. And I will get into that when we get to the song that I think it shows how he twisted it. Then you get to the part where he begins to discuss how he doesn't know if she is watching over him or if he should just go. And I believe this is the actual introduction of the Black Parade, and that is also shown in the music video for the song. And I believe the entire rest of the song is a back and forth between him and the lead marcher, I'm not sure what it would be called, the leader of the parade, talking to one another. And the lead of the Black Parade is basically telling him, you need to carry on, you need to move on, you need to accept your fate, And you need to realize that the woman you loved is the woman who's going to remember you. She's going to mourn you. She's going to be the one who continues to carry on your legacy. And I think what the song's supposed to show is a theme that comes up later in the album. If you can't forgive yourself, if you can't forgive the ones around you, you will rot in your own personal hell. Now, I think near the end of the Black Parade, probably partially because it's meant to be a single, but also to show the hope that the protagonist starts to feel because the Black Parade has come for him, he is asked by the leader of the Black Parade to look at his peers, to look at those around him and see the mourning and understand that they cared about him. And he basically says, I'm just a man, I'm not a hero. In other words, he's accepting he was not pure in his life, but I want to carry on. And I think the album does a very good job of showing this moment of hope before everything crashes. Because I think I Don't Love You is the song that secures that the protagonist is going to go to hell. I think all of these things, these first few songs, happen in the few moments after his death. He's heard his girlfriend on his deathbed admit that she cheated on him. The Black Parade has come, but he's still standing over his own deathbed. And I think in the song I Don't Love You, there's two ways to look at it. It's somewhat talking past tensively. It can be talking about all the fights he ever had with her. It can be talking about all the bad things that came in their relationship. I also think it's very much in the moment. He's standing over his deathbed saying, when you leave me in this hospital, when you leave me for dead, would you even have the guts to tell me you never loved me? Or you don't love me anymore? And as this sad song progresses, there's a very brief moment where he shows a flash of anger that basically says, would you have the guts to say, I don't love you like I did yesterday? And I see that as him turning from the light. The opportunity he was given by the Black Parade to go to heaven was lost when he decided that he couldn't forgive his girlfriend. And that leads into House of Wolves. Now, I think a lot of people get the song pretty much on the head, in my opinion, about it being his descent into hell. I do believe that's what it is. I do believe there's moments, and it's hard to pick apart the sentences, but there are moments where I believe the leader of the Black Parade is basically saying to him, this is what you had coming. But I think the focus point of the song is that he's at his own funeral, and he's listening to a priest basically summarize his life in a very purified manner. And he's mocking the priest. The priest is saying, oh, he was an angel, he was a hero, he was a good man, and he's basically standing over the priest with no one able to hear him, mocking it. He's saying things like I-S-I-N in the background, and get the choir boys around you, it's a compliment, I swear, they're singing for me. He's mocking them. And then he says, burn this house down. And I think that's the part where I realized it's supposed to be set in a church. In other words, it's set at his funeral, because he's saying burn down the house of God. He's descending into hell. He's receiving all these fake compliments, or not fake, but purified compliments about him. As a priest compliments him, he's descending. And it's a flashback to Vampires Will Never Hurt You, when he says, somebody burn the church. So I think in the song, it's going back and forth between him listening to that and realizing how wrong it is, but also mocking that people don't understand that. And it represents the self-loathing. It represents all these things that come up later in the album. And I think the get up, get out at the end is him yelling at the people at the funeral. Again, although they can't hear him, it's him yelling at them to leave. It's almost the same thing as in I Don't Love You. These people are leaving him. He's dead. He can't be seen. He can't be heard anymore. But he's angry. And that message is getting angrier. Just leave me. Just go. You don't know me like you think you do. I've done bad things. This song fits. And the last few songs have fit. Now, the next problem is the song Cancer. I get why it was placed in the middle of the album. It makes sense in terms of tone. It gives you that slowed down moment before the absolutely chaotic song that follows it. But I think not just because Cancer is placed when he was alive and before he goes to hell, and it's a sad song that doesn't encompass the rage that he is showing in the songs around it. I think it also shows a very good hint as to the storyline of his wife cheating on him and why his anger is so blatant in earlier songs. Because one of the most important parts of the song is he says, the hardest part of this is leaving you. And he says something that most people would consider weird these days. Most people want their other to leave and carry on and get on with their lives and be happy. He says, I would ask you to be true. In other words, even when I'm dead, I'm asking you not to go to another person. And if that was placed closer to the beginning of the album, before Dead, before This Is How I Disappear, it makes sense that that would cause his wife to panic and say what I believe she's saying in This Is How I Disappear. This is how I disappear, and I live my life alone without you. There's things that I have done that you should never know. She is in so much agony, she is in so much pain for what she did while he was dying, that she chooses to accept what she's saying. She will not carry on, and she's told him the truth. I can't be true to you because I wasn't true to you. And I think that point would have struck home to more people, if I'm right, if it had been placed near the start of the album. Now, the next song is Mama. I personally don't believe the song is a flashback. I believe it's some sort of a hell loop. You find out that the patient was a soldier. You find out that his mother did not support him being a soldier, which sounds like it's opposed to what his father wanted. His father wanted to be him to be a protector of the weak, a protector of the damned, which suits being a soldier, but he went anyway. And his mother basically told him, for that, you're going to go to hell. And in this song, it sounds like he's speaking to his mother from hell. He's basically saying, Mama, you're right. I went to hell. For all the things I did with my gun, for all the things that I did in war, for all the things I did after, I went to hell. But Mama, what you don't understand is you are going to go there too. And he also implies something, that they're building a coffin her size, which it makes sense, everybody's dying, but I think what's implying is because he's dead, he's aware she is actually dying. She's either sick or she's very old, but he's aware she's going to die. And near the end of the song, you hear her crying begin, and you hear her begging for her son, and these things begin in the background, and his tone changes. I take this as his mother's at his grave crying for him, and he hears it. From wherever he is in hell, whether or not it makes sense, he hears her mourning, and he realizes he doesn't want that for her. And he basically says, if you can acknowledge I'm your son, and you love me, and you care for me, I will show you the way to return from the ashes that we fall. And the ashes that they fall, I believe, means, Mom, I will show you how to get to heaven and not go to hell where I went if you can listen to me. And that leads into Sleep. Now, I believe Sleep is the song where the patient follows his mother home, again, in spiritual form. And it's very important to note this. She cannot hear what he's saying. And I think that's a theme in the album. Once you die, it is too late to fix the things you've done. It's too late to make amends with the people you want to make amends to. It's too late to take back the damage you made. If you don't do it in life, it's too late. So he follows his mother home. And I believe the song, even though, yes, I'm aware that the recordings shown in the song are actually recordings from when the band was staying in the mansion they stayed in to record the entire album. I think the point is his mother is listening to therapy sessions that he was in. And ironically, I don't believe the intention was supposed to be that these therapy sessions are from his time at war. I think they're set before the war. And I think his PTSD is supposed to be on display in a lot of these songs, including Mama. But I have a reason for believing these sessions are placed before this song. And basically what he says to his mother in this song is, "Mom, I did the things I chose to do. You need to accept it. You need to move on. You need to carry on. You need to forgive yourself. You need to sleep." And I think in the initial context of the song, it's meant to be literal. She's staying up all night. She's not sleeping. She's already sick. And he's basically saying, "Mom, you need to let yourself carry on, get going. You need to forgive yourself. You need to either forgive me or forget me." And I think she dies near the end of the song. I've heard a lot of people say that the wake up screaming in the background under the blur of noise while he yells "just sleep" is intended to be him speaking to himself. I don't think it is. I think he meant for his mother to rest, but he realizes she died sitting, listening to these albums, these recordings of his sessions that he had. And then he starts screaming, "Wake up," because he realizes she never let go, she never forgave herself, and for the same reasons as him, it will send her to hell. Now, the next song is probably the song that most people say does not fit on this album. It's "Teenagers." I disagree. I think it fits in this version of the album, and I think it probably fit better on the original version of the album that did not come out. And again, these are guesses. I think the song "Teenagers" is a flashback, and it shows that he was bullied as a teenager. It shows his disenchantment towards the world, his disenchantment towards society, and his disenchantment towards his parents. And then it brings up a topic that's rarely touched on in music. Well, it actually is. "Jeremy" by Pearl Jam. It's "Pumped Up Kicks" is another song. It brings up a school shooting. It says that he's going to get even with these people who bullied him as a teenager with what he's got under his shirt. But I think in this version of the album, that never actually happened. I think he had the gun, potentially, depending on how you hear the recordings in the other part of the song, he might have recorded a manifesto that his mom eventually found, or he went to therapy. Either way, I think during this part of the album, you are hearing the recording, whatever the recording is, therapy sessions while he was in high school, a suicide note that he wrote and then never committed to, or a manifesto before a potential school shooting that he eventually moved away from. And I think what caused him to lead away from it is in "Disenchanted." And I think "Disenchanted" fits directly behind "Teenagers." I think almost this entire part of the album fits together properly. In "Disenchanted," you find out that he was there when the cause went out for the Queen. And I assume this is supposed to be the Queen sent out her people to determine or to encourage people to join the war effort. And he decided to take up arms in order to go to war and to lose his anger or to take it out on people in what would be considered a justified way. And I think this is the distortion that you hear from "Welcome to the Black Parade." He took his father's message about being a hero and a savior, and he twisted it, and he knows he twisted it. He knows he didn't go to war for the right reasons that his father talked about. He went to war because he was an angry person, because he was a hateful person from what happened to him, and that's why he went to war, and it ruined his life. He saw tragic things, he saw horrible things. I believe he came home with PTSD. He was cruel to his wife or his girlfriend. I would assume through different lyrics in the album, he beat her. He had substance abuse issues as seen in "The Sharpest Lies." And eventually it caught up to him. Now, whether cancer was caused by something that happened in the war or by one of his addictions, it caught up to him. And this song speaks directly to the audience. MCR knows their audience is full of people who are broken, hurt, need somebody. And they're speaking to the audience in this. And they restate the central theme of the album very clearly. If you are a sad song with nothing to say, your entire life is leading up to your death. If you can't move on, if you can't do what you need to do to be happy and to have your life and live your life, forgive those around you, eventually you'll just be a memory. And you'll be a sad memory. And you won't be able to change it because it will be too late. And I think they're trying to tell their fans, the world can be hard, but you only have one life, and you don't want to wind up like the patient. Now, that leads into famous last words, which I think is partially sung between the protagonist or the patient and his wife. I believe this is set potentially months later. I believe this is set after there's been a time frame for her to recover. Because I believe she goes to his grave, and in the verses, he's speaking, but in the chorus, it's her. And he's basically saying to her over his own grave, potentially his mother's grave, that I know I can't change what I did. I know I can't change what happened between us. But where's your heart? And he's trying to get to her, and he's trying to make her understand the lesson he learned the hard way. And she comes to the grave actually angry. She's saying in the chorus, I'm not afraid to keep living. I'm not afraid to walk this world alone. Which, unlike in the beginning when it was an anger, a tragic thing, where she's saying, I'll walk alone, and this is how I disappear. I'll live my life alone. It's more of a positive thing. She's willing to move on. She's willing to do things herself. He's gone. You tell me if I stay, I'll be forgiven. I believe that harkens back to potentially when she left him while he was sick with cancer. I believe it harkens back to maybe her going to live with her parents, and that was when she cheated. But I think it's, she literally left him then, and he told her, if you come back, I'll forgive you. And what she's saying now in this first chorus is, you always told me if I come back, you'll forgive me. But what I need to do is move on. I'm going home. I'm going back to the life that I care about. I'm not letting this ruin my life. What's left of it? So, in the second part, in the second verse, he basically starts to make it clear that he doesn't want her to not move on. He says things about, I see you laying next to me, and he says things like, oh no, I'm sorry, that's the third verse, I'm getting ahead of myself. He says things about, can't you see that I'm so weak? Can't you see that I'm incomplete? And again, at this point in the song, you're thinking she's probably not hearing him. But he's basically saying, do you not see how broken I let myself become? I'm on the other side of a jet black mirror. In other words, I'm in the black hole. I'm in the abyss. You're staring into the abyss. This will happen to you if you can't move on. She's willing to let go, but it's still because she's angry. Rather than being sad, rather than being hurt, rather than blaming herself, she's still coming to him and angrily saying, I'm willing to get on with my life and move on. But there's that anger. And now, the third verse, and I apologize, I got those flipped up. I got confused for just a second. The third verse, I believe, and I do believe this, it's a mental breakdown for her. She lays down on his grave, and he lays down beside her. Now that's either physical, because he's in the ground and she's laying next to him, or because he's laid down in spirit. But he's basically telling her, with words he thought he would never say, he's telling her, I still love you. And I think this part of the album shows the hope that the album is intended to portray at the very end. I think that she does hear him in this part of the song. She hears him say, "For everything that happened, I love you." And I think the last chorus is meant to be her moving on in a more positive way. She accepts his love. She accepts that she needs to move on. But she needs to move on by letting everything go. And I do believe that's what this song is supposed to show. She shows up at his grave. She's willing to move on, but she's still angry at him. And by the end of it, she forgives him. And I believe that the point is she will go to heaven because she's willing to let go of all these things that were holding her down. And I choose to believe that the implication is that now that the patient has managed to save somebody, that he has managed to accept that all the things he did and that he caused, he has to let go of. He might have gotten to go to heaven as well. And then there's the secret track, Blood. And this will be a good segue into the next section, which you will hear in a few days, but I'm recording back to back. Blood basically nullifies the whole album if you take it as canon at this point. In Blood, it basically implies he wakes up in the hospital. He's not actually dead. And all of this was a fever dream, or potentially some kind of like a ghost of future present type scenario. Future past. Anyway, ghost of the future coming to him and showing him what's going to happen if he doesn't change his ways. I don't like that. I actually, in this scenario, choose to just say Blood doesn't fit in this part of the album. Maybe it's supposed to be set in a psychiatric hospital earlier in the album, but they chose to cut it because it doesn't fit the pacing of the album. I think maybe it's supposed to show him coming back from war, basically saying, from a soldier's perspective, I gave you blood. I gave you my blood. I gave you the enemy's blood. I gave you my tears. And everyone's calling me a hero. In other words, the doctors and the nurses, they adore me so, but it's alarming because I'm an awful person. I've done awful things. Now, to be clear, I have a lot of respect for soldiers. The poor men and women who go through those things for our freedom don't deserve to be made to feel like bad people. But from my understanding, a lot of them do. And I think if this song does fit in this version of the album, the intention was supposed to be before he died. This might have been before he found out he had cancer and when he was trying to recover from the war. And it's basically him saying, I feel like I'm an awful person, but just like in House of Wolves, everyone else thinks he's a good person. And he's basically asking, did the sacrifices I made mean anything? Now, at this point, you're going to hear the end of this video. And in a few days, I will be back with what I believe is the untold story of the Black Parade. And I believe in that version, the person that you're hearing speak is not dead. See you next time. Welcome back, guys. This is section 2 of my discussion of this plot line of the Black Parade. And last time I told you my interpretation of the story that made the album. Yep, a few points I made are probably very different from the points that